I used to serve as a first responder, dedicating my work life to safeguarding others while stationed along a quiet stretch of California's Central Coast. After years of that routine, my life took a drastic turn in the mid-1990s when an unforeseen crisis thrust me into a profound, near-death experience. At the time, disclosure about such phenomena was rarely encouraged. There wasn't much public discourse, nor any how-to guides for finding real clarity. As a result, I kept my extraordinary encounter hidden for many years, unsure how others would react. Eventually, once I retired from active service, everything came rushing back. I was compelled to find answers. That pursuit led me to age-old traditions, shamanic perspectives, and knowledge shared by various indigenous groups. Wisdom that seemed to offer a far deeper understanding than the standard mix of established historical narratives, religious frameworks, and scientific explanations we usually hear. Before exploring every facet of that discovery, it might be best to begin at the turning point of my own tale, the night in 1994 that forever reshaped my comprehension of life and death. I was on duty, responding to emergencies during a relentless flu outbreak. Healthcare facilities in the area were overwhelmed. The lines of patients seeking relief were endless, creating a tense atmosphere for everyone in the medical and public safety community. We were working nonstop, much like many frontline crews do in intense circumstances. In the midst of that chaos, my team encountered an individual holed up in a darkened room, her health in dire condition. As the designated paramedic, I rushed to assist. In my eagerness, I positioned myself right next to her, face to face practically, and attempted to fit an oxygen mask over her mouth. Unfortunately, she exhaled just as I inhaled, and that fleeting moment felt ominous, as if something inside me recognized that a terrible illness had slipped into my body. Within days, I was more ill than I'd ever been in my entire life. The typical remedies offered no relief. Plain hydration, rest, and over-the-counter options did little to improve things. My condition worsened so badly that I eventually realized I needed an ambulance myself. There was relentless vomiting, dehydration that sapped every last ounce of energy, and a racing heartbeat that made me truly afraid. I remember stumbling to a mirror. My own sunken face alarmed me. My pulse felt weak, an ominous sign for someone trained to read vital signs. It struck me that I was barely getting any blood flow, and I knew in my gut how dire the situation had become. Desperate, I had my niece call for help because I could no longer manage on my own. Local rescue personnel arrived swiftly. Before I knew it, I had IV lines set up in my arms and we were speeding toward a hospital. There was a sense of awful irony. After all those years of rescuing people, now I was the patient. By the time I was wheeled in, the place was crowded with others who shared symptoms similar to mine. The head doctor, overwhelmed by the sheer number of cases, seemed to use a one-size-fits-all approach, prescribing the same combination of medicine to everyone. In his view, relieving pain and stopping nausea was the critical step. I was dehydrated and exhausted, eager to believe that if I just got some fluids and a small break, I could withstand the illness from home. But the staff had their protocols, and I complied without resistance. Though I didn't necessarily require potent painkillers or anti-nausea medication, the medical orders were clear. A nurse administered a synthetic morphine pushed directly into my IV, paired with a nausea remedy. I was already upright, thinking about returning home when it hit me. My wife told me later that my eyes rolled back in an almost cartoonish way before my body collapsed onto the cot. Alarms triggered, causing the staff to flood into the room. They reversed the opioid effects with everything they had in their arsenal. Those reversal agents, typically reserved for critical overdoses, found their way into my veins repeatedly as the staff scrambled to revive me. Despite their efforts, my blood pressure bottomed out, unresponsive. Before I knew it, I was taken to the intensive care unit. I stayed in intensive care overnight. Once daylight returned, doctors concluded that the only reason I hadn't succumbed was because of my robust cardio conditioning from doing triathlons and similar endurance sports. My body was simply better at distributing oxygen. Consequently, none of my organs took a permanent hit, but my vessels had dilated to a startling degree, leaving the small quantity of fluid in my body insufficient to maintain healthy circulation. In how-to or tutorial style, it's like my vascular system expanded to multiple times its normal size, yet the amount of fluid stayed the same. Anyone familiar with best practices in emergency medicine can tell you this is a dangerous predicament, as it deprives tissues of oxygen. During that night, as the medication destabilized my vital systems, I was locked in a twilight state. I never regained normal consciousness. At some point, I separated from my physical self, an occurrence known variously as a near-death experience or out-of-body phenomenon. That moment was like stepping from a cramped, stifling closet into a vast universe brimming with indescribable light. I was enveloped by orbs, perhaps akin to brilliantly colored stars, and I sensed a loving welcome that almost defies language. There was an electric ecstasy, like a cosmic pulsation that made every fiber of my being tingled with gratitude. Expert tips on describing near-death encounters often highlight that words fall short. It felt like gliding through an ocean of luminous energy, liberated from the constraints of ordinary life. The euphoria was more than just a fleeting high. It was a transformative feeling, a viral hack for the spirit, if that makes sense. I realized my true identity had been concealed or forgotten during my time on Earth. There was an immediate sense of recognition, almost as if I was reuniting with a realm more authentic than anything I'd known. Questions buzzed through my consciousness. How could I have forgotten this? Why had I believed my human persona was the entirety of my existence? These colored orbs, seemingly alive with consciousness, pulsed around me. I experienced acceptance. I wasn't a stranger. I was among my kin, re-entering a dimension they inhabit constantly. Then, with no real transition, I arrived in a distinctly solid environment. This location felt grand, yet intimate, illuminated by a soft, indirect light. Surfaces were arranged in a way reminiscent of a workshop or research station. Tables, equipment, and silhouettes of figures moving about. 3 small beings in hooded robes stood close by, beaming with broad, almost mischievous smiles. Their giggles echoed, giving the whole scene a playful air. I found them enchanting and bizarre. While they appeared compact, there was a playful energy in their eyes. Though no words were exchanged in the usual sense, communication flowed effortlessly, as if telepathy handled all dialogue. They inquired about my experience, joked among themselves, and seemed genuinely thrilled that I was there. I recalled a certain movie that had once depicted mysterious, hooded creatures, though those were typically portrayed as unsettling. Here, the mood was very different. These particular beings radiated kindness. One looked into my face and made a remark suggesting I didn't recognize them, but strangely, I had a vague sense of familiarity, like in a behind-the-scenes revelation about a story you thought you knew. I wondered if we had shared origins, as if I was once part of their group or realm and the memory had simply been tucked away. Their inquisitiveness was astounding, peppering me with questions about my recent life, about love, about learning, as if eager for me to provide step-by-step accounts of my earthly journey. Watching them, I noticed someone else hovering in the background, a tall, wispy figure with a fluid form. This being looked somewhat like a shimmering ripple in water. His features stretched and shifted slightly as if viewed underwater, making it hard to fully pin down his shape. The sense of authority emanating from him was unmistakable, yet it wasn't hierarchical or harsh. He was more like a wise teacher, exuding waves of compassion, which made me feel unexpectedly emotional. My throat constricted the way it does when you think you might burst into tears of relief. The love radiating from this entity was overpowering, as if he embodied the ultimate guide to unconditional kindness. Despite the somewhat casual ambiance, mischievous chuckles from the smaller trio, gentle nods of reassurance from the taller being, there was a clear intention afoot. Something was supposed to happen next, akin to a big reveal or a tutorial on life evaluation. In many spiritual traditions, it's said that after death, souls undergo a life review. So I half expected these beings to nudge me toward recollecting my earthly actions in a step-by-step breakdown, analyzing significant moments, regrets, or joys. But that didn't quite unfold as I'd imagined. Instead, the tall, fluid-like presence grinned irresistibly when I mentioned the possibility of looking back over everything I had done. Rather than a formal process, it was more like he considered it optional, as if saying, sure, if that's what you want, no rush. Curious about the best practices and how one might recap their existence, I offered stories I thought were relevant. There was a particular regret about a job opportunity. I had once turned down a posting at an isolated island's park, a place my partner had been thrilled about. Instead, I'd chosen a different path. The memory lingered as something I might have done differently, yet the tall figure seemed untroubled, almost amused that I was bringing up such minor details. Then he gently indicated that my reflection time was over. I was told in no uncertain terms that I'd be returning to my previous life. To me, that announcement was startling, unwelcome even. The small hooded trio moved away as if they had completed their portion of the conversation, leaving me alone with the tall being. I balked. I told them there was no point in sending me back. Who would truly suffer if I stayed in this boundary-making realm? Sure, my parents and partner might mourn, but they were resilient. It wouldn't be an irreparable emotional blow. I tried to reason that they could cope with the loss of my physical presence. However, the tall figure responded with humor, as though my logic was delightfully naive. With a final flourish of that warm, overwhelming compassion, he calmly insisted that I had more tasks to accomplish, more scenes to experience. In a blink, the luminous environment started dissolving, fracturing at the edges, fading as though I was tuning out of one frequency and slipping into another. Suddenly, I plunged into an intermediate zone, a realm shadowed by loneliness and an indescribable emptiness. This was not the ultimate pit of despair, but it certainly wasn't the bright cosmic environment I had just savored. I felt a flash of fear that I tried to ignore for years afterward. It was as though an invisible border existed between the physically dense existence on Earth and that glorious place of stunning light. This dismal domain hovered in between, thick with sadness, devoid of hope. I wanted no part of it. Then, just as swiftly, I found myself reinserted into my physical body, the tether of earthly life snapping me back. When I regained normal consciousness, time seemed distorted. I was in that hospital bed, monitors crowding around me, feeling the slow climb of my blood pressure as the medication wore off. Gradually, the numbers crept up, first in the 40s, then the 60s, advancing bit by bit. A passing nurse expressed relief, telling me they had feared the worst, but were now relieved to see signs of improvement. I, on the other hand, couldn't help feeling disoriented. My biggest question was simple but overwhelming. Why am I here again? The moment felt surreal. I had been so certain that I had left permanently. The nurse offered a brisk affirmation hinting that I had been very close to an irreversible departure, but somehow fell out of escrow, as she jokingly put it. She was pleased that I was back among the living, but her comment didn't lift my spirits. A wave of regret washed over me, a profound sorrow that I was separate once more from that realm of boundless peace. Over the next few days, that spectacular memory began dimming, the way a vivid dream starts to dissipate upon waking. Yet I couldn't shake the conviction that what I had experienced was immeasurably real, more real than daily life. I confess I slipped into a grim mood. Though not the same as clinical depression, it was more of a deep yearning for the home I'd glimpsed. In those early days after my ordeal, I couldn't stop talking about it. I told anyone who would listen that we have everything backwards. Death is not an end, but a massive upgrade. Private faith or public opinions didn't matter. I knew, as certainly as I knew my own name, that human existence doesn't evaporate when the physical body ceases to function. Some folks, especially those reeling from recent losses, a child, a spouse, a beloved companion, clung to my words, hoping to find solace. Others not so much. For them, the entire concept was too fantastical or not in line with mainstream beliefs. Emphasized to grieving friends that no one truly disappears. I tried to illustrate how my consciousness had remained intact. I was still myself, still possessed of personal quirks, an inner sense of identity, and even the mental chatter that often accompanies daily life. That continuity was undeniable. It was as if I'd simply shifted my view, transitioning from one channel to another, in a behind-the-scenes demonstration of reality's wider dimensions. In a sense, I wanted to broadcast the message as a viral hack to ease the universal dread of dying. Everything I observed suggested that reality extends far beyond our cursory perceptions. As time wore on, though, the latest trends in social acceptability exerted pressure. One day, a colleague discreetly pulled me aside. He hinted that chatter about my experiences was picking up steam behind my back, and not necessarily in a supportive way. It caused me to question my willingness to speak freely. I recognized that telling my story in every hallway or at the fire station lunch table might not be the best approach if I wanted to maintain a harmonious work environment. In an effort to keep the peace, I let the subject drop. For roughly a decade and a half, I limited my retellings to only the most trusting confidants, effectively placing a lid on this extraordinary knowledge that had revolutionized my worldview. Following my retirement, which arrived around a pivotal year, the elder states of my soul seemed to beckon me forward, urging me to revisit what I had locked away. It became clear that the next phase of my life no longer governed by emergency calls or paramedic rotations, was an opportune time to open up about what had happened. That's when I delved into deeper ancient teachings, exploring narratives from shamans, indigenous healers, and wisdom keepers whose perspectives are often undervalued in popular discourse. Their insights resonated strongly with what I had experienced: multidimensional realms, expanded states of being, and the ultimate guide that love seems to provide in bridging all these levels of existence. And that's where my personal journey began, intertwining with step-by-step explorations of spiritual concepts. In the same way that one might follow an easy method for unraveling a puzzle, I systematically dug through overlooked histories, cross-cultural mythologies, and best practices for communicating with hidden dimensions. Along the way, countless traditions affirm that life is a much bigger tapestry than we ordinarily see. The moment you peek behind the scenes, you notice that consciousness doesn't hinge solely on the body's function. It was like uncovering a hidden library, its shelves brimming with evidence that validated what I'd witnessed firsthand. Now that you've heard the framework behind my near-death episode, you might wonder if there are top 10 strategies for navigating such otherworldly encounters or for consoling those who've lost dear ones. Though I'm no authority in the official sense, I've come away with some essential insights, gleaned from personal exploration and listening to others who have navigated similar territory. First and foremost is the power of unconditional compassion. Not just a fleeting sense of kindness, but a profound love that transcends the gratification of our immediate circle, allowing us to empathize with every form of life. That was the benchmark in the luminous domain, where everything pulsed with acceptance. Secondly, adopting an open-minded curiosity helps us question the illusions that shape our everyday viewpoint. My experience of forgetting who I truly was speaks volumes about the intricacies of human embodiment. It's so easy to get lost in the stories we craft about ourselves, identities, roles, or achievements, until something like a near-death experience knocks us out of that trance. The way I see it, we cultivate humility when we remain aware that there's infinitely more to our existence. We might call it a tutorial in cosmic perspective. Thirdly, practicing a daily routine that balances the mind, body, and spirit can be transformative. Whether it's mindfulness, prayer, or a form of creative expression, these daily habits function as gentle reminders of the bigger picture, making it easier to sense that behind-the-scenes cosmic reality. People often seek easy methods or viral hacks for spiritual clarity, yet the best practices often suggest the steady approach of consistent, earnest practice. Nothing flashy, just a quiet discipline that fosters an ongoing relationship with the deeper layers of reality. Fourthly, and perhaps most significantly, we might consider acknowledging that the material world is not the only channel available to us. My own journey taught me that realms of purity and radiance coexist with domains of gloom, and each is more accessible than we might suspect. Our consciousness appears to be a traveler capable of switching frequencies, depending on our level of openness. Bringing that awareness into everyday life can shift how we interact with stress, relationships, and the unknown. It's like an ultimate guide for living with more peace. Fifth is a willingness to share, even if carefully, to foster understanding and reduce the stigma around these events. When a person has experienced the intangible, their perspective might become a trending topic in a smaller community of spiritually inclined individuals, yet remain in uncomfortable conversation in mainstream circles. Exercise discernment in how widely you discuss these sensitive topics. The step-by-step process I followed was to be quietly available for those who felt drawn to listening while respecting that not everyone can readily absorb this kind of account. Sixthly, for those searching for best practices on healing after grief, I strongly advocate remembering that love transcends physical separation. Seeing that beloved friends and relatives remain near is not simply a comforting fairy tale. It's an almost tangible truth if you've been to that radiant place. Even pets factor in, their essence persisting beyond physical departure. By anchoring ourselves in such understanding, we create an environment where mourning can transform into a meaningful connection that lasts across unseen boundaries. Before I turn to the final chapters of my broader story, I recall multiple times I stood at the intersection of acceptance and doubt about my experience. Individuals, particularly those in high responsibility roles, be they firefighters, Navy personnel, or others, frequently worry about reputational damage if they share unusual narratives. Yet, as the latest trends in consciousness studies indicate, more professionals are stepping forward with accounts of out-of-body experiences. Hearing their confessions can be comforting. When I discovered that a retired officer had been told to hush up about a near-failed plane incident, it resonated deeply. I, too, had once been encouraged to remain silent. We shouldn't discount the behind-the-scenes pressure that can weigh on people who encounter the mysterious. Colleagues, organizations, sometimes even entire institutions might discourage open discussion, fearing it will raise eyebrows or challenge conventional thinking. In my case, a polite heads-up from a coworker signaled that others found my story unsettling, so it might be wise to keep it to myself. And that's exactly what I did, burying it in the depths of my mind. But in time, wisdom guided me to let it resurface, reminding me that a truth this powerful can't be sealed away indefinitely. Eventually, after closing the door on my firefighting career, I felt compelled to explore ancient relics of knowledge, bridging the gap between shamanic insights and the rigid frameworks I had grown up with. My aim wasn't to forcefully reconcile all the views, but to glean a bigger perspective on this multi-layered existence. Engaging with indigenous wisdom can feel like a step-by-step unveiling. You realize that multiple realities can overlap, and we collectively inhabit only a sliver of what's actually there. By staying open and inquisitive, I discovered fascinating realms of data that, in conventional academic circles, might be labeled too esoteric. For instance, I stumbled upon accounts of shape-shifting in various indigenous cultures, where spiritual practitioners reportedly shift their consciousness to merge with animals or natural elements. Crazy as it might sound, it aligned with the underlying concept that mind is not confined to the physical body. This understanding was deeply relevant to my near-death journey. If, in that luminous dimension, I could exist as an expanded, cloud-like phenomenon, it made sense that bridging different states of existence was not only possible, but might be a fundamental law of reality. It was definitely a behind-the-scenes glimpse into how flexible consciousness can be. Others I spoke to elaborated on the idea that Earth is a dense training ground for souls, a stepping stone in a grand cosmic classroom. This idea is trending now in many spiritual circles, as more individuals look beyond mainstream interpretations of life. Could it be that our trials, heartbreaks, and joys exist within a grand puzzle meant to refine our spiritual stamina? Reflecting on my own story, it's easy to see how adversity, like that devastating illness, led me to reevaluate my priorities and reaffirm how deeply love and empathy matter in every realm. I started seeing parallels in religions, philosophies, and scientific theories. Quantum physics, for one, increasingly explores the possibility that consciousness shapes reality at a fundamental level. Ancient spiritual texts have preached the same concept for centuries, albeit with metaphorical language. When I combine the academic lens with my near-death memories, it feels like a meeting point of conventional knowledge and intangible wisdom. The synergy energizes me, and I see it as a powerful tutorial on expanding our worldview. Looking back, I appreciate that immediate sense of kinship I felt with those luminous orbs and those small robed figures. It was as if the illusions of separation had fallen away. On Earth, we often rely on me versus you, or insider versus outsider. Yet in that transcendent space, the entire sense of division evaporates. I was me, and they remained themselves, but we were also part of a unified network of consciousness. It's a reality check highlighting how limited and fleeting typical earthly boundaries can be. To me, that's the ultimate guide to living more harmoniously, right here and right now. Even the ephemeral environment where I landed, the space filled with tables, equipment, and indirect lighting, seemed like a behind-the-scenes workshop for cosmic creativity. I still suspect that these beings spend their existence studying, exchanging energy, and guiding souls who momentarily dip in and out of this dimension. They're not overlords or administrators in a hierarchical sense. Instead, they appear to do their joyous tinkering from a place of unadulterated compassion, reminiscent of wise children at play. Reflecting on that tall, misty figure who projected so much love, I realized how easily I could have combusted with gratitude in his presence. Perhaps that's the hallmark of divine or advanced entities. Their essence radiates acceptance so strongly that it challenges our deep-rooted convictions about unworthiness or fear. Whether we conceive of them as angels, cosmic guardians, or advanced forms of consciousness, the effect is the same. We're reminded that unconditional love is not a myth, but a lived experience in certain states of being. Another key takeaway is the importance of recognizing how corners of reality might not be comfortable. I caught a glimpse of that lonely space near the boundary of returning to my body, a stark environment where isolation reigned. This place felt raw, gray, and weighed down. It served as a reminder that not every plane is benevolent stardust. Some realms reflect sorrow, confusion, or unfulfilled longing. Best practices in psychic exploration advise stepping into such shadows with caution. Yet remembering that dark corners exist can be a motivator. It reinforces how vital it is to nurture the kindness that fosters connection to the luminous realms. The earth, with its joys and troubles, also resides in a mid-sed that offers infinite lessons. Waking up connected to tubes and monitors, my body still racked with weakness, felt like slipping into a simplified, narrower bandwidth of awareness. It took time to readjust, both physically and emotionally. The staff told me it was a miracle I'd survived. I overheard my family discussing how frightened they'd been, worried I might not pull through. In those moments, I tried sharing the wonder I had just witnessed, but found myself overwhelmed by the acute mismatch between hospital bustle and that transcendent clarity. The comedic quip from the nurse about falling out of escrow hinged on the borderline space between living and departing. But the seriousness of that threshold was something few truly grasped. Over subsequent days, I moved from a state of sadness at losing that cosmic rapture to a deep commitment to keep its memory alive. The initial intensity of the recollection began to wane, and with it, my unwavering certainty found occasional challenges. Was it all real? Was it medication-induced hallucination? The rational mind can be a formidable critic, casting doubt on even the most earth-shattering revelations. Yet the resonance of the experience clung to me with unwavering conviction, compelling me to treat it as valid, more so than any routine dream or elaborate imagination. I confided in close friends about the permanence of consciousness, encouraging them to trust that our loved ones remain intact no matter how final the grave appears. Some tearfully confessed that my words provided more solace than anything they had heard in religious services. They wanted step-by-step instructions for connecting with those they had lost, whether through meditation, prayer, or simply mindfully recalling shared memories. I offered what I could, always clarifying that I lacked official qualifications, but my story stood as living proof that something indescribable lingered beyond bodily boundaries. Eventually, higher-ups and co-workers learned of the phenomenon I described. One day, someone I respected quietly suggested that continuing to share my tale might risk fueling rumors or tarnish my professional standing. To them, retelling mystical visions seemed akin to dabbling in fantasy. I saw the caution in their eyes, that silent stretch of line between wanting me to be well and wanting to protect me from scorn. Their words echoed the hush-up approach I'd heard about from others in uniform. So, I took those warnings to heart, choosing to remain silent in public forums. For 15 years, no small chunk of life, I practiced that hush. I poured my energy into everyday tasks, focusing on service and skill building. My personal life expanded, family ties grew, and my external identity thrived as the dependable, action-oriented person I had always been. But privately, the memory lingered. I felt it pulsing occasionally, as if beckoning me to reconcile body and soul. If you're scouring for how-to advice on dealing with secrets of this magnitude, the path I chose involved outward conformity while internally nurturing the flame. When I finally stepped away from my official duties in 2010, my hidden experience unfurled once more. The dam broke, reflections long submerged bubbled up, a massive wave of recollection and interpretive curiosity swept in. No longer bound by the obligations of my career, I found I had the time and freedom to dissect the events, re-examine them from multiple angles, and integrate them into a more coherent life perspective. And so began a new chapter, filled with reading, meditating, and occasionally venturing out to share with like-minded circles, always mindful that certain audiences might not be receptive. Those explorations led me deep into ancient legends, the nature of cosmic cycles, and the synergy between primal wisdom and modern knowledge. I uncovered parallels that bridged science, spirituality, and the intangible glimpses I received in that luminous domain. Step by step, I witnessed how each puzzle piece fit snugly into a vast tapestry that spanned beyond traditional boundaries of time and geography. Whether you label it the spirit world, higher dimensions, or other channels, they all point to the truth that existence is layered and subtly interconnected. I also encountered teachers and researchers who had compiled similar stories, from uniformed personnel just like me to everyday civilians who found themselves brushing death's threshold. Their frequent recollection included an all-consuming love, a sense of calm, and an acute awareness that life extends far beyond mortal cessation. Those testimonies, combined with my own, reinforced that my account was not an isolated case. Shared themes rose to the surface: euphoria, revelations of identity beyond human roles, relationships with entities or guides, and a renewed sense of responsibility to share the news. It was heartening to see how widespread these experiences actually were. Though our modern culture often focuses on the tangible data, science, logic, my personal journey reminded me of the immeasurable, intangible aspects that shape our reality. I came to understand that we can forge a more balanced worldview by honoring both, recognizing that a purely empirical approach might disregard crucial strands in the fabric of existence. And so I blended my respect for pragmatic procedures, like the training I had used for so many years in emergency service, with an openness to the unknown. It's a best practice in bridging worlds, keeping the flame of inquiry alive while harnessing the discipline of systematic thought. The story of my near-death episode in all its wonder, grief, and revelation stands as a shining example of how quickly one can pivot from business as usual to confronting the infinite. I think back to how routine that night shift seemed, typical tasks and rhythms we paramedics knew so well. None of us anticipated a major turning point in the timeline of a single life. This unpredictability might be the ultimate teacher, reminding us that the door to the extraordinary can swing open at any moment, through illness, accident, or even chance spiritual awakening. That awareness yields humility and an invitation to live more fully, bridging that luminous dimension with today's nuts and bolts reality. Even if we can't keep one foot perpetually in that radiant environment, we can carry the echoes of its warmth wherever we go. Each morning offers a fresh opportunity to practice compassion, honor each fleeting moment, and remain receptive to the possibility that realms of wonder might lie just beyond our line of sight. Even the simplest interactions, helping a neighbor, comforting a friend, or choosing kindness in stressful situations, can be a step toward ensuring that unconditional love shapes our shared world. In the end, my story underscores that we are not confined to our narrow definitions of self. We are vast, complex beings with hidden rooms of awareness waiting to be discovered or remembered. The glimpses I caught of cosmic joy and loving guides stand as testaments to an expanded existence. While I rejoined this earthly stage unexpectedly, the lessons from my sojourn in that other realm endure. They encourage me and perhaps encourage us all to realize that life is so much more than meets the eye. The ephemeral nature of everything that perplexes us in day-to-day matters pales in comparison to that grander view beyond the threshold. Though some parts of my account remain deeply mysterious, I've found solace in the knowledge that love, unconditional, boundless love, forms the lifeblood of all creation. Each time I retell my narrative with sincerity, I'm reminded that our essence remains unbroken, even if the physical form transitions. To embrace that perspective is to wear a new lens, one that sees beyond the illusions of limitation, connecting us with the fundamental truth that we are more than these temporal bodies. In a sense, it's the ultimate guide to living courageously, with compassion at the forefront, answering the cosmic invitation to remember who we've always been. For those curious about bridging realms without facing the risk that I did, there are gentle how-to practices, such as guided contemplations, breathwork, or mindful dream states, that can offer fleeting tastes of expanded realities. While these techniques might not replicate a near-death event, they can spark a sense of wonder and open the spirit to innate possibilities. The step-by-step path to deepening one's connection with intangible dimensions involves patience, sincerity, and the willingness to let go of preconceived notions. Sometimes I still gaze at a night sky full of stars, remembering the swirling cosmic display that welcomed me on the other side. I remind myself that distance and space might be illusions, that these bright points in the sky may be akin to the orbs that surrounded me with comfort. In that moment, my chest tightens with the same quiet awe I felt all those years ago. I think about the tall, flowing figure who radiated endless compassion and how even the small, robed beings brim with humor and acceptance. They have inspired me to live each day with humility, patience, and an eagerness to keep exploring the wonder of existence. We all have personal stories that either uplift us or break us. Yet my experience taught me that every event, no matter how dark, can become part of an elevated narrative. Some might label it a miracle, others might call it psychological phenomenon. Yet from my viewpoint, it is the clearest demonstration that reality extends beyond typical confines. Behind the scenes of ordinary life, an immense backdrop sparkles, beckoning for us to awaken to its presence. Each person's journey is crucial, weaving a tapestry of shared growth. If we can carry anything from near-death experiences, perhaps it should be the assurance that our essence isn't confined to the fleeting chapters of a single lifetime. Time and again, I've been asked if I fear death after glimpsing that radiant state. The truth is, my perspective on fear shifted dramatically. While I'm still conscientious about preserving life, my own and others, I don't harbor the same dread of ceasing to exist. Having brushed up against the boundary, I was gifted with an unshakable understanding that we don't vanish into nothingness. Instead, we pass into an arena of acceptance, joy, and a deep, abiding sense of belonging. It is, in many ways, a behind-the-scenes revelation of what might be waiting for all of us. Of course, the day-to-day tasks haven't disappeared. We still face bills, conflicts, and countless mundane chores. But glimmering behind everything is the knowledge that there's so much more going on. This perspective doesn't negate life's practicalities. Instead, it enriches them. An ultimate guide to mindful living might suggest weaving cosmic gratitude into each item on our to-do list. Whether it's cooking a meal or driving to work, we can integrate the memory that beyond our material consents lies a greater unity with all that is. Stepping back, the entire story forms a saga of challenge, revelation, and integration, culminating in a viewpoint that acknowledges both the struggles of earthly life and the transcendent freedom of expanded consciousness. While I do still experience sadness, frustration, or disappointment, I handle them differently, remembering that these emotional waves are part of the Earth curriculum. If I get stuck in traffic or face unexpected setbacks, I practice seeing them as fleeting moments in a broader cosmic drama, a tutorial in patience and perspective. As for making sense of the comedic robe trio, the tall, shimmering guide, or the confounding ways reality seemed to bend, perhaps the best approach is to let them remain partially mysterious. Sure, we can craft theories about interdimensional beings or cosmic illusions, but the vibrancy of that experience reverberates well beyond rigid explanations. The older I get, the more comfortable I am with not having every piece pinned down. The wonder of it sparks a childlike curiosity, fueling the desire to keep learning, exploring, and sharing. It's a tender mix of humility and awe that I suspect will color the rest of my days. If you're following the step-by-step storyline of my transformation, you may notice it hasn't ended. Each day reveals new chapters of growth. My time spent understanding various traditions, Navajo practices, Celtic journeys, and others reinforces the possibility that human existence intertwines with spiritual ecosystems in ways we've barely begun to fathom. Their teachings often align with the notion that death, rather than a finale, marks a shift in vibrational state. It's a viewpoint reminiscent of what I experienced firsthand in that wild, star-sprinkled expanse. Eventually, the notion of returning to life after that cosmic detour took on both literal and metaphorical meanings. Literally, I came back to a hospital bed with beeping machines and anxious relatives. Metaphorically, I re-entered a realm of discovery that dwarfed my earlier conceptions of identity, time, and purpose. A bigger calling crystallized, to merge the insights from that luminous territory with the challenges and possibilities of everyday life. That might be the easiest method to ensure my experiences serve something larger than personal curiosity by weaving them into actions that spread kindness and alleviation of suffering in the world. I have realized that the best practices for integrating a near-death awakening revolve around compassion to ourselves, to one another, and to all realms that exist, whether visible or invisible. It's a day-by-day, moment-by-moment choice to embrace what I like to call cosmic empathy. That might mean pausing before judging others, extending a hand to someone down on their luck, or holding hope for a better tomorrow, even when circumstances seem bleak. If any tutorial can be derived from my journey, let it focus on making compassion the cornerstone of how we navigate the human experience. And so, my story merges with countless other narratives that emphasize how ephemeral life can be and how boundless reality actually is. My near-death experience might be just one brushstroke in a sweeping portrait of human potential. Are there top 10 strategies for retaining clarity about the intangible? Maybe a bullet list wouldn't do it justice because the depth of each spiritual awakening is unique to the individual. But I can offer an abiding trust. Though the illusions of limitation often cast long shadows, they are never impenetrable. A single beam of truth can pierce them and reveal that we walk among miracles every single day. You might wonder if my heart remains tethered to that luminous realm even now. The honest answer is yes. Part of me always resonates with that infinite horizon, feeling an undercurrent of belonging there. But living on Earth means I have tasks to do, connections to forge, lessons to integrate. I trust that when my time truly comes, I'll reunite seamlessly with that vast ocean of light, that swirl of star-like orbs, that gentle, comedic band of hooded friends, and that towering being of heartfelt generosity. Until that day, my role is to walk graciously in this world, bridging the two realms as best I can. In the final understanding, the near-death perspective teaches that earthly existence is only one chapter in a much larger saga, and I've become content with that knowledge. I'm convinced we're all on an odyssey together, weaving experiences that enrich the collective consciousness. Whenever I recall lying in that hospital bed at the brink, then soaring among luminous companions, I feel waves of gratitude for the entire spectrum. Life, death, rebirth, and the realms in between, they're all vital threads in a cosmic tapestry that continues to unfold. It's a narrative that urges each of us to step beyond our comfort zones, question the boundaries of what seems possible, and keep an eye out for hidden wonders. If nothing else, I hope my story imparts a sense of serene courage. While the concept of dissolution may alarm us, the reality in my experience is that what awaits is far more gracious, caring, and unbelievably expansive than the mind can imagine. So let us not fear existence's transitions, but rather approach them with readiness, compassion, and an open heart. After all, the road may twist, but the destination is both our origin and our ultimate home. To bring things to a close, I stand by what I felt so keenly in that realm of dazzling light. Love endures, consciousness persists, and the interconnectedness of all life is far richer than we typically grasp. The near-death journey was a profound teacher, reminding me that every moment, no matter how mundane it may appear, is an invitation to reflect on the incredible tapestry swirling just beneath the surface. Whenever sorrow strikes or confusion overwhelms, I remember that exultant freedom, the sweet release from limitation I tasted there. In that memory, hope blossoms, and I find the strength to keep going, to keep sharing, and to trust that we are indeed eternal travelers, simply passing from channel to channel in an awe-inspiring, infinite design.